that song means. It means it's time for Management 573, more on project management. Now we're going to be looking at the week 3 assignments. So if you are present and ready to go, please raise your hand. All right, I can see everybody's eager and enthusiastic about this. So let's get right into week number 3. Now we have 2 related assignments. One is a discussion and the second is a paper, but they're both about the same thing. They're talking about the same subjects, okay? So, when you're doing one, think of the other at the same time. The discussion starts out by visiting a website called the Tech Republic. And what you need to do is copy and paste this link into your browser. It's not an active link. And then you're to read the article that comes up, which is why critical path is critical to project management. And then at the end of the article there are some additional papers, topics on critical path, and the assignment is to read all of those and base your answers to the questions about what's the value in critical path, how do you see your relevant critical path for your project, explain roughly how many tasks your project will include, and then explain whether the tasks are critical or not. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about first how to get to the website. This is what it's going to look like. As I said, that's not an active link. You have to copy and paste that into your browser and it'll take you to this page here. It's a fairly short article. And then at the end of the article, after the author has explained how critical path works, not necessarily how to do it, but how it works, there are some other articles available for you to read. They're not long articles, they're written in a fairly straightforward fashion. So this is kind of to prepare you, in addition to reading your textbook, for working on your discussion post as well as the paper. The week 3 paper is building upon your current project. Remember, in week 1 you described the project, this project definition, so you're talking about what you were attempting to do, and week 2 you talked about what type of resources would be necessary. And now in week 3 we're beginning to build the plan, the actual plan about the steps that are going to be necessary to complete the project. Okay, so for this assignment you're to write a 7-page APA formatted paper, and the paper should include actually a breakdown of the tasks that would be necessary in your project, and then also the path or the sequence of these tasks that will be necessary to reach completion. And again, the chapter will provide you with more explanation, and the papers will. But I went to a third website here. This one is called mindtools.com/critpath, and it allows you to look at a fairly short project and step by step how you would work on it. So the first thing you need to do for your project is to list all the activities. Sometimes we call them tasks. Those two terms are interchanged, okay? So here it says list all activities, then what does it do? Then it says prepare a task list. Okay, they're the same thing. And so here you can see that the tasks are high-level analysis, okay, so that's kind of developing your overall plan. And then this is going to be a computer system, so it's selection of hardware platform, then the installation and commissioning of the hardware, then the detailed analysis, the core modules, detailed analysis, supporting modules. So what you're going to do with your project is in the same way that this one is laying out step by step what has to be done. You're going to lay out all the individual tasks that need to happen. Now generally it's best to lay out the list so that what you have to do first comes at the top of the list, what you have to do next comes in the next line of the list, what you have to do next comes at the third line. But as you think of the various tasks, you may find that you think of one later that actually has to happen before something else can happen. So you may have to juggle your list around a little few times till you get it in the order that you think is most important. Then the second thing is to decide which tasks need to be done first, and then also which tasks must be completed before the next task can start. So as you see here, task A, which is the high-level analysis, that has to start before anything else can happen. And then once that's completed, after 1 week, it's going to take a week to do. After it's completed, then we can start on task B. So you see here the task B is dependent upon task A. And then task C is going to be dependent upon task B, and so on. So you're going to, we call it building dependencies, but you can just think of it, you know, what do you have to do first and what has to be finished before you can do something else. So that's the beginning, is make your list, and this completes the list. And then step 2 is to begin to turn your list into a diagram. And it works from left to right on your paper. So here we see the illustration of the first task being the high-level analysis. That's task number 1. And then it's connected to task number 2, which has to happen next. And then below that, task number 2, once that's completed, then we can go to the next task. As we complete the entire diagram, we sometimes will find tasks that are going in parallel. For example, if you have multiple people on your project, multiple resources, they may be actually working on different tasks at the same time. During the same week, you may have, if you're thinking of a house construction, you may have the people putting on the roof at the same time the people are doing the plumbing on the inside. So there may be several different groups of people that can work at the same time. And that's important to identify those things, because that will determine how long the project is actually going to take to completion. When the entire list has now been converted into a diagram, it may look something like this. Yours may look something like this, where you see 2 arrows going at the same time. Those are 2 different tasks that are being completed at the same time. Okay. When one task follows another, it means that the first task must be completed before the second task can start. And as you see, as you work your way across the diagram, to the far right side of the diagram, you can see all the tasks are completed eventually in task number 6, and then task number 7 is the detailed training, and that's the finished project that's completed at that point. And this is an explanation about how the diagram was completed. If you go to the actual article in the website, the Mind Tools website, these are clickable links for each one of the headings, and it'll take you into more detail. But I just wanted to kind of give you an overview about resources that you have available when you're working on the critical path. So the keys to success. Now this is a very brief rundown. Normally when I teach this in an undergraduate program, we took several weeks to be able to kind of just get through this part here. But it's graduate school, you're supposed to be able to figure things out for yourself. But if you run into problems, you know, get in touch with me. So the step 1, you know, and now we're talking about your project. List all the tasks that'll be necessary to complete the project. Okay, so you know, I'd say, well, how do you know what the tasks are? Well, when you think of the project, whatever yours happens to be, it's got to be broken down into several different steps that have to be completed. I mean, even making a dinner has different steps that have to be completed. You have to decide which recipe you're going to use. You have to look at the ingredients and see if you have everything that's necessary. Some ingredients are going to take longer to cook. You may have to go make a shopping trip to the store to be able to do that. There's prep work that has to happen before you can start frying things. Maybe you saute things for a while before you put them in the oven. So there's a whole sequence of things that have to happen. And generally when you look at a recipe, it tells you the steps, the tasks that are necessary to complete this particular meal. That's exactly what you're trying to do here. So if you're more familiar with recipes than you are with projects, take a look at a fairly elaborate recipe and see the steps that are broken down to indicate these are the types of things that have to happen. Then relate that back to your own project and say, well, gee, I really didn't think about all the different things that have to happen. That's exactly the same thing that making a project is. So that's the first step. Then you have to determine which tasks have to be completed before another one can start. Okay, so you have to go to the store to buy the groceries before you can start preparing the meal. But on the other hand, you have to decide which recipe you're going to follow to know which ingredients you want. So which things have to happen first and have to be completed before you can start the next one. Then you need to estimate. Again, what we're trying to do is figure out how long this project is going to take to finish. How long is each particular task going to take to complete? A lot of times when we look at the entire project and we say, well, that'll be done in about 3 weeks, you may be close, you may be way off, because all the different tasks along the way may take longer or shorter than you anticipated. But once we break it down to each individual task that needs to be done, then we need to identify, well, if this task is, if I'm going to the store, that generally takes me about a half hour. So we're not going to have anything we can start cooking until I get back from the store. So, we're going to start now, start driving, and then we can start preparing or unpacking after 30 minutes. So you have to do that with your project. Each task is going to have a certain amount of time. Each task is going to have something that may have to happen before it. Then decide which task can be worked on at the same time. If you have a helper in the kitchen with your recipe, you may have somebody prepping one thing while you're doing something else. Well, that shortens the length of the entire process because 2 different tasks are going on at the same time. When you are the only person working on the project, then the task is going to take as long as it takes, or the project is going to take as long as it takes you to complete each task, because unless you're multitasking, I guess that's where the term came from, each task has to be completed before the next one can be started. So decide which task can be worked on simultaneously. Then, as we saw in the previous couple of slides, convert your list into a diagram. It starts on the left, that's where the project begins, and then works through the tasks in sequence until it reaches a conclusion on the right. To get to what we call the critical path, the shortest amount of time when you calculate the addition of each task along the path to the completion, there may be several different paths through your project, but the shortest path is going to be the critical path. That means the very quickest this project, assuming all your calculations, all your estimates are correct, it's the very shortest period of time that this is going to take to complete. Now, for certain projects you may say, well, if it took another day or 2 longer, it wouldn't really matter. Or, if it took another hour or 2 longer to cook this meal, it really wouldn't matter because I'm preparing it for tomorrow. However, if there's a set time that something has to happen, like they've already calculated when the Super Bowl is going to happen and where it's going to happen, so all the preparations for the Super Bowl have to be completed by the time that it's ready to happen on that particular day. They wouldn't say, well, we didn't finish the painting the stadium on time, so we're not going to hold the Super Bowl today. So certain projects have a particular time. Once you set a wedding date, all the plans leading up to that wedding date have to be completed, or you're not going to have your music, or you're not going to have your catering, or you're not going to have something or other. The preacher may not show up unless you've completed all the tasks necessary in the appropriate amount of time. So the critical path is the quickest way that the project can be reached completion. The tasks, the different things that are on that path, that critical path, those tasks are labeled critical. And it doesn't mean that they are the most important or the most difficult to accomplish. It just means that those tasks have to be started on time and have to be finished on time, or the project is going to be delayed. Okay, so that's what critical means when we talk about critical path networks. And that's all there is to it. The goal is to be able to build stuff. And to build stuff, we have to know the different tasks that are necessary to make the project safe, secure, and effective. Well, you know how to get in touch with me if you have any particular questions. I'm sure you will. And I look forward to this week. We're making a lot of progress in the course. So until next time, goodbye and good luck.